superpowers. This is what we're going to be looking at right the way across your level sevenness, focusing in on your superpowers for your master's studies. And this is the way in which I want to envisage this for you to go through these particular areas. So first of all, and especially if some of you are saying that you've been out of study for a while, and maybe some of you are coming in straight away from level 6 studies. So what is the difference between level 6 and level 7? And especially for those of you who haven't been studying for a while, have things changed? So what is it that we need to look at for this level 7ness? Well, there are 3 particular superpowers that I want you all to develop over these next few years. So whether your first year's just starting, or those of you coming back in your second year, or certainly those of you doing your dissertations, and you might think, oh, blimey, if I haven't got it right now, when will I get it right? Here's the time now to think about this. You've got 3 different superpowers here: the criticality in thinking, reflexivity, and your academic citizenship. And that's what I'm going to focus on throughout this brief presentation. The reason why I'm talking about criticality in thinking, about the whole notion of critical, look at the way that people say, oh, I'm having to do critical thinking at level 7, or I'm having to do critical analysis. So what's the difference in critical analysis at level 7 compared to when you did critical analysis at level 6? And I get a number of students that say to me, David, I've read a whole load of papers and they're so good, I can't find anything wrong with them at all. I can't criticize them at all. And that's the big problem here, that so many people tend to think of that word critical in the popular use of the term. You know, you have to criticize something. And whenever you talk about criticizing it, they often think that means you have to criticize something negatively. Doesn't mean that at all. So on purpose, I'm using this term criticality in thinking, just to take that shift away from the word critical thinking. Okay, then Andrew mentioned about reflection, so reflection and practice, that all of us as healthcare professionals, we've had that drummed into us right from the start. So we're all used to being reflective practitioners. So what's the difference then between reflection and reflexivity? Because at level 7, you need to be focusing more now on reflexivity, not just reflection, dare I say critical reflection. Okay, and then this whole notion of exteriority, you getting outside. So it's not just a case that you're a clinical person when you're working in the clinical world, and then you're an academic person when you're in your studies. It's not that you've got these 2 different hats and never the twain shall meet sort of thing. You're now the combination of those. But how does anybody outside, exterior, how does anybody outside know about it? So when you did your bachelor degree, you might have done a dissertation with that, but how many people ever saw that outside you and your marker? Very few people think of going to conferences and talking about it, or even writing it up for publication. And this is what your academic citizenship is all about. How do people know about you as a study person? How are you getting your message out? And these 3 powers underpin all that you're going to be doing at level 7. So Austin has got a link for this Adobe Express page called Understanding Level 7ness, and it's embedded into all of my modules. So if you haven't used it yet, please have a look at this. Okay, it's an Adobe Express page that explores to you the difference between level 7 compared to when you did your level 6 stuff. And there's something called the academic descriptors, which all universities use to describe what we mean by the different levels. So you'll find in this Understanding Level 7ness that I've actually put in some of the academic descriptors. So you'll find out exactly what it means. Say, for example, with critical analysis, it'll tell you what it means to study critical analysis at level 7 as opposed to level 6. When I started my nurse education at the age of 17, that was back in the days of what we used to call chalk and talk. Look at what you've got available to you now. this little animated GIF. I designed this in Adobe Express yesterday in about 20 seconds. You've got free access to all of these tools. So as part of your study with us here, this is one of the ways in which you might want to develop your creative digital literacy to tell your story, to get outside that exteriority. Imagine doing presentations and you put this in, and you go to lots of other presentations and it may be what's called death by PowerPoint. Automatically, you do something different and you've got people's attention with it. Austin and I are going to mention using AI for your studies and your research. And two of the things that the university really encourages you to do around AI is to be completely ethical and honest with this. Okay, so you have to use it in an ethical way. It's not that you're going to get AI to start writing your work for you and then you submit this as though it's your own. That would be totally unethical. So what do we mean by being ethical and honest? Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at the heart of it all, is this whole notion of criticality in thinking. And here I've split it into three different ways. You're going to start making decisions, even if it's, say, Sue, when you said then you're on the postgrad diploma. So one of the decisions you're going to have to be making in the future is, are you going to do the top-up MA to this once you finish this? So you're going to have to start decision making. Or some of you, when it comes to thinking of your projects, you might be thinking about, look, there's so many different aspects of a topic I'm interested in. How am I going to narrow this down to make it something meaningful? And how am I going to work through some of the problems that face us? And then obviously sharpening your abilities around using analysis. So first of all, in making decisions, in the past, especially when you did your bachelor dissertation, you might have been comparing and contrasting two different treatment approaches, say a medical approach and a surgical approach to a particular topic. So you're looking at two and you're comparing and contrasting those. Now there's far more complexity, and there's far more complexity because you may now be working at higher levels in your role. So it might mean that you're now advising your trust on which type of approach to take. You're part of a whole interprofessional team that have to be making decisions. Now, they could be ethical decisions. It might be, supposing you've got limited funding for a particular type of treatment, but you've got far more patients needing it than you've got the money to do. So this is where the complexity is coming in. And studying at level 7 will give you the confidence to know how to find out answers to those problems. And even when it comes to making you're making up your own opinions, then it's not just that you're plucking them off the top of your head, but you're reading around topics so that your opinion is an informed opinion. Or a hypothesis, that word just means an informed guess. So you might say, well, I guess that if we do something or other, this is what will result from it. But how are you guessing? To make it an informed guess, that's what becomes a hypothesis that you can then go and test out. Okay, now when it comes to improving your problems, and again, look at the little image in front of you representing the 4 pillars of clinical practice. That took me maybe 30 seconds, maybe 2 minutes to do this in Adobe Express. And that's one of the products that you've got free access to at the university. So looking at problem solving, as I mentioned at the beginning, you're working as clinical selves, but now you're also studying selves as well. So you've got the opportunity to bridge the gap between these two. It could be that when you're working in clinical practice, there are certain issues that often come up as a problem. And quite often you may find that all different people, all your different colleagues have got various answers to these problems. And you think, but which is the right answer? Is there a right answer? Are we even asking the right question to start off with? This is the way you're thinking critically now. And that you're bridging that gap between practice and education, theory and education. But part of the reflexivity means you need to take a step back. So even when you start thinking of your dissertations, you might think, oh, I know exactly what I want to study. And I did a dissertation as a bachelor student once, so I know exactly how to do a dissertation. That's what I'm going to do. What we're going to be asking you to do at level 7 is to say, no, pause for a minute. Take a step back and think about this. Even the way you've done a dissertation in the past, is that the only way to do a dissertation? Could there be a better way? Is there a different type of dissertation that fits your topic matter even better? So you're starting to ask all these particular questions, and the more you do that, the more you're developing your skills to be able to evaluate the benefits or the drawbacks of studying in a particular way or carrying out your projects in particular ways. So you don't have to rush into everything. Take a step back, and that's where your reflexivity is going to come in with this as well. As part of your strategic development here, this is where you're thinking at a totally different level now. So there's higher level cognitive skills. And there are 3 here that I'd suggest are really good for you. First of all, scrutinizing assumptions. It's not just a case of looking at, say, for example, problems in practice. Is not just a case of looking at them from one dimensional point of view. It could be that you're starting to have to think, say, for example, we're all used to the abbreviation EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion. So you might think, right, maybe I need to start looking at this from a different point of view. Because when it comes to studies, it's not only those who are included in the study, but who might be excluded from it. And you might think, well, actually, when we do studies, we tend to do it on young people. If you're looking at lots of studies that come out of America, for example, it may be university-based students form the biggest groups of people in studies. They tend to be white, affluent, able-bodied, heterosexual. Who are the ones who are being excluded? And why are they being excluded? And would their stories be any different? Is it worth looking at these other stories? That's when you start exploring the reasoning behind all of this. So you're probing and you're questioning in totally different ways. And that's when you're becoming multifocal in your analysis. As Andrew said, when he was using words like ontology and epistemology. So epistemology is how do you know what you say you know? I can give you a really good example here. One of the students who will be graduating with the MSc this year, she's working with people who live homelessly. And she said a lot of them suffer with frailty. But whenever you look at typical frailty scales, so just search for this, frailty scales, those scales have been developed on people who are 65 plus. And it's looking at health conditions that happen in older people. And therefore, this whole notion of frailty is something designed on old people. And she said, but her clients, they're frail, but their frailty is in totally different ways. So you can't use traditional frailty scales on them because they're not old enough to tick these boxes yet. So somebody needs to invent a new type of frailty scale, looking at people who are frail in different ways and for different reasons. That's when you're using this multifocal analysis. And also being open-minded in how you're critiquing and looking at other people's work. Lots of the doctoral candidates I work with, they often say to me, once they get into their doctoral research, they say, look, the more I find out, the more I realize I don't know. And that's a wonderful, wonderful insight there. Okay, when it comes to analysing the arguments, look at that old saying about when people say, well, sometimes I can't see the wood for the trees. What you're going to be doing for this level of analysis is taking the wood apart, looking at all the trees, and start analysing the difference in the trees themselves, between the trees, and then see how all those trees together fit in one big area to become a wood. So you're not just analysing it at one particular level, but you're exploring it in all totally different levels. Here I'm talking about the micro and the macro levels of all of this. And the reason I've put the word arguments in inverted commas there is because I'm going to encourage you to start using synonyms. You know, when you're writing something up in Word, and if you right click on it, you can check for alternative words, for synonyms. Please try that, especially on the word arguing. So many students write their work and they're always talking about, this person argues one thing, somebody else argues something else. And at the end of the day, when I'm reading it, I think, oh my goodness, all these people are constantly arguing. Think of other words you can use. It may be somebody hypothesizes, or somebody suggests, or postulates, or considers. There are lots of other words. Academics don't only have to argue, okay? And then once you've done that, once you've looked at the assumptions and analysed your, dare I say it, arguments, then you need to draw all of this together. And that's called the idea synthesis. You're bringing it together. There's a few references I've got at the end from this wonderful person called Emily Wapnick, and she's on TED Talks, if you like listening to those, when she talks about you being a multi-potentialite. So check it out, okay? And she talks about idea synthesis as being one of these superpowers. So once you've done such wonderful in-depth analysis, that's when you are drawing it together to come out with where you stand on this. That's your new ideas, which hopefully then you will start sharing with others. That takes us to this notion of reflexivity. It was Donald Shern who came up with the concept of reflect in practice and on practice. But reflexivity is more looking at you as a person in that situation. So you're not just reflecting on a critical incident, for example, but you're looking at this in a much deeper and wider way. You're looking at your role in this. What were the role of others? Were there any extenuating circumstances? What caused this to happen? So you're looking at it from a far wider perspective than just a critical analysis on a particular incident in practice and on practice. You're now looking at what are the implications on the trust? Are there going to be safeguarding issues involved in this? So you're taking your reflexivity to much greater levels. And when you start sharing that with others, that's when they're going to realize your professional gravitas, the strength in your arguments, because you're not just doing it from a one-dimensional focus, but actually taking this much greater. So you're drawing on more meaningful insights. You're going back to the drawing board, looking at what other people are saying on this, so that by the time you've looked through your reflection on this and seen all of these different perspectives, the ideas you're coming out with are really what's going to promote you as you're the person to be listening to here. And that's boosting your career trajectory. Also, when you think about journaling, so maybe writing down notes, not just a reflection of what you're thinking about things, but it could be tips on what to do next. It could be your feelings, or if you feel stuck on something, why are you stuck? And really good to go back on this. Now, again, when it comes to writing your dissertations, if some of you are going to do dissertations on more quantitative topics, so looking at numbers, those types of positivist studies tend to be very outside of you. They're very objective. But where's the you in all of this? Therefore, if you keep a journal on this, at the end of your dissertation, you might even want to write just like a 2-page, my journey throughout these studies. So where did you start from at the beginning of your degree, and how have you changed and developed right by the time that you've ended it? Especially if your dissertation tends to be more objective, so there's no feeling of you in it. Here you're bringing the feeling of you into this. And even for those of you doing qualitative studies, you might find that with the qualitative work, it's really going to touch you in personal ways. So how are you growing and developing through all of this? And it's good to talk. Unlike, say, for example, if any of you have ever sat exams in the big examination hall and you're making sure that there's nobody that can look over your shoulders to see what you're writing because you want to get the best marks and you want to be totally unique with this. At this level, it's good to talk. Share your ideas with others. And that's not just in class, it's not when we're just meeting together like this, but also on the online forum zones as well. You'll notice on Moodle there are forum zones. Keep the conversation going. It may be that you go away from a session and you think, oh, blimey, I forgot to ask a question. Don't wait until next time. Go onto the forum and actually say this, because by talking to others, you are going to learn from one another. And also, if you're looking at some of the issues which could be controversial, maybe something that's ethically bound, for example, good, share those ideas, because the more opinions we can get on this, the greater that's going to leave you at the end of the day. And the final bit here then is looking at your academic citizenship. So certainly when people come into university to start teaching, we talk about this whole notion of academic citizenship. But for yourselves, I'd say, well, you're part of that as well. Even though your biggest role is in clinical practice, you're also an academic as well. You're studying, and hopefully you're going to be sharing that with others. And that's when other people will get to know about you. So look at ways in which you can share your knowledge with others. Now, maybe that's going to be through writing papers. Hopefully you'll start writing articles, even if you're going to start off with opinion pieces, which are really good to write. So start sharing your ideas. Or maybe you go back to work and you'll do a presentation to your colleagues. Maybe your trust will ask you to do a presentation. Or maybe you're going to go to professional conferences as well. And the more you start building up networks with people, the greater you're going to get known. And especially by using different types of social media as well. So start posting messages. If you write something, make sure you highlight it on social media. If you're going to a conference, take pictures, start posting about the conference. And you never know, you might actually bump into some of the famous people that you've actually cited in your work as well. I've almost finished. So here we go. Some of the benefits in doing all of this. First, you've got a great way of networking with others. As I say, you might go to a conference where you think, well, look, I'm a bit too nervous to stand up and do a conference presentation, but I'm okay in developing a poster for this conference. Then all of a sudden you bump into somebody that you've referenced on your poster. That's when you're building up these networks. Okay, so it's wonderful opportunities for sharing with others. It's also ways in which others may then turn around to you and say, well, look, I like some of your ideas here. I'm actually writing a new paper on this. Would you like to take part in helping on this? Now, let me give you a really quick example here. One of the images, the image I used of the 4 pillars of advanced clinical practice, I posted that on Blue Sky on Monday. And I said, look, I'm having a fantastic time designing a new presentation. And here's a little bit of arty stuff I've just done. So on Blue Sky, once a month, there's a big national conference that meets. It's called Learning and Teaching in Higher Education. Yesterday, I had an invite to share this presentation to host a meeting at the end of October. So I'll be doing this presentation, and then I have to sort of moderate questions and answers throughout that session, but only because I posted it on Blue Sky. And here you go, providing support through the different types of communities. So I've already mentioned on chat, please join up to ResearchGate. Start using social media. So LinkedIn, Blue Sky, lots of people are coming off Twitter at the moment because of the bloke who owns it. But look at ways of sharing who you are on all of these. And finally, to draw it all together, these are the three critical things, your superpowers, I've asked you to be thinking about. So look at the ways in which you're thinking. Have a look at that level 7ness and see what the descriptors are, the academic descriptors for thinking at level 7. Start considering the difference of reflection and reflexivity, and then look at ways in which you can engage in your wider community. And that's it. I've got some resources. Okay, I draw you here to Emily Wapnick, especially on TED Talk.